Title: Your heart attack will cost you your license. This fix works. There's a sentence that every pilot secretly fears hearing. It doesn't come from an air traffic controller. It doesn't come from an instructor. It comes from a doctor. Until further notice, you cannot fly. For many pilots, that moment happens after something unexpected: a hospital visit, chest pain, a diagnosis, a heart attack, and suddenly, the thing you've spent years building, your flying life, seems like it might be over. Your medical certificate is gone. Your logbook sits quietly on the shelf. And your airplane, whether it's a humble Cessna 150, a reliable Cessna 172 Skyhawk, or a beautiful cross-country machine like a Cirrus SR-22, just waits in the hangar. But here's the part most pilots don't realize. A heart attack does not automatically mean the end of your flying career. In fact, thousands of pilots have returned to the cockpit after serious cardiac events. And today, I want to walk you through what actually happens, why many pilots lose their license after a heart attack, and most importantly, the fix that has helped many of them get back in the air. If you're a pilot over 50, or even someone just thinking about learning to fly later in life, this might be one of the most important aviation conversations you'll ever hear. Let me start with a story. A friend of mine, we'll call him David, had been flying for more than 25 years. He owned a Mooney M20U Ovation Ultra. Beautiful airplane, fast, efficient, the kind of aircraft that turns a 4-hour drive into a smooth 90-minute flight. David loved traveling in that airplane. Weekend trips, mountain flying, occasional long cross countries. He once flew from Arizona to Montana in that Mooney just for lunch with an old friend. That's the kind of freedom aviation gives you. Then one morning, everything changed. David woke up with chest pain. Not extreme, but enough that his wife insisted they go to the hospital. Within hours, the diagnosis came: mild heart attack, a blocked artery, emergency treatment, stent placement, and thankfully, a full recovery. But a few weeks later, when David thought life was returning to normal, he discovered something else. The FAA had grounded him. His medical certificate was no longer valid. And suddenly, the question appeared that every pilot dreads: will I ever fly again? Now, here's where things get interesting. Because the FAA does not automatically ban pilots who have had heart attacks. What they do instead is pause the process. They want proof that your heart is stable, that the risk of sudden incapacitation is low, and that you can safely operate an aircraft. That makes sense when you think about it. Imagine flying a Piper PA-28 Cherokee on a quiet evening, or cruising at 8,000 feet in a Diamond DA-40 Star. If a serious cardiac event happened mid-flight, the consequences could be devastating. So the FAA has strict rules, but those rules also include a path back. And that path is something called Special Issuance Medical Certification. This is the fix many pilots never fully understand. Instead of permanently denying your medical, the FAA allows pilots with certain medical conditions to return to flying under close monitoring. But there's a process, and that process can feel overwhelming if you don't know what to expect. After a heart attack, the FAA usually requires several things: cardiologist reports, detailed treatment records, stress testing, imaging of the heart, sometimes even specialized evaluations. The goal is simple. They want to know how well your heart performs under stress, because flying an airplane, even something relatively calm like a Cessna 182 Skylane or Piper Saratoga, still requires alertness and cardiovascular stability. Now, here's the part that often surprises pilots. Many cardiologists do not fully understand aviation medical requirements. They treat your heart condition successfully, but they don't provide the exact documentation the FAA needs. That's where many pilots lose months, sometimes years, trying to fix paperwork. And this is where experienced aviation medical examiners become incredibly valuable. They know exactly what the FAA wants to see. They guide the process, and they help prevent the delays that ground pilots unnecessarily. Let's pause here for a moment, because this raises an interesting question. Should aviation medical rules change for older pilots? Many people learning to fly today are in their 50s or 60s. Some plan to fly well into retirement, and aircraft today are safer and easier to operate than ever before. From the advanced avionics in the Diamond DA-62 to the safety systems in aircraft like the Cirrus Vision Jet SF-50, Technology has dramatically improved situational awareness. So here's a question for you. Do you think the FAA should reconsider how it evaluates cardiac risk for experienced pilots? Or do you believe the current rules are exactly right for protecting safety? I'd really like to hear your perspective. Share your thoughts in the comments, because conversations like this shape the future of aviation. Back to David. After his heart attack, he assumed his flying days were over. He even started thinking about selling the Mooney. But instead, he contacted an aviation medical specialist. And that changed everything. Over the next several months, he completed the required tests: cardiac stress evaluation, imaging studies, follow-up exams. It wasn't quick, but the results showed something encouraging. His heart was functioning normally, blood flow was restored, risk levels were acceptable, and eventually the FAA granted him a special issuance medical certificate. The day he received that letter, he walked straight to the hangar, started the engine, and took the Mooney back into the sky. Now, not every pilot returns to the same kind of flying after a medical event. Some choose aircraft that reduce workload. Instead of fast cross-country aircraft like the Cessna TTX or Lancair 4P, they move towards something more relaxed. A Cessna 177 Cardinal, a Beechcraft Musketeer Sundowner, maybe even a classic Piper Cherokee 140. These airplanes are forgiving, stable, and enjoyable to fly, perfect for relaxed weekend flying. Others take a completely different direction. They fall in love with slow aviation, backcountry strips, grass runways, mountain lakes, aircraft like the Cub Crafters X-Cub, Aviate Husky, or Piper PA-18 Super Cub, flying that feels less like transportation and more like freedom. And honestly, some pilots say this kind of flying becomes even more enjoyable after a health scare, because suddenly every flight feels more meaningful. Of course, some pilots continue flying more advanced aircraft. Turboprops like the Pilatus PC-12 NGX or Daher TBM 960, twin-engine aircraft like the Beechcraft Baron G58 or Piper Seneca Vive, even light jets like the Honda Jet Elite 2 or Cessna Citation Longitude. But those aircraft demand strong health and consistent medical monitoring, which is why preparation becomes so important. Let's talk about something many pilots overlook: prevention. Heart attacks rarely happen without warning signs. High blood pressure, cholesterol issues, lifestyle habits, the same things doctors talk about every day. And here's something interesting. Pilots who maintain excellent cardiovascular health often keep flying much longer. They pass medical exams more easily, they avoid deferrals, and they reduce the risk of unexpected grounding. Think about the type of flying you want to do in your 70s. Maybe cruising across the country in a Vans RV-10. Maybe exploring remote airstrips in a Quest Kodiak 100. Or perhaps enjoying peaceful evening flights in something simple like a Pipistrel Virus SW or Aeropract A22 Foxbat. Whatever that vision looks like, your health becomes part of your flight planning. And that brings us to the real lesson behind this story. A heart attack can pause your flying career, but it does not always end it. With the right treatment, the right medical documentation, and the right aviation medical guidance, many pilots return to the cockpit, sometimes flying even more carefully and thoughtfully than before. Before we finish, I want to ask you something. Imagine you had to step away from flying for a year because of a medical issue. When you finally returned, what airplane would you choose for that first flight? Would it be something simple like a Cessna 150, a trusted traveler like the Cirrus SR-22, or something adventurous like a de Havilland Canada DHC-2 Beaver landing on a remote lake? Tell me in the comments, because sometimes the airplane we dream about returning to says everything about why we fly in the first place. And those stories are always worth hearing.